Hey, Cece got a
Cece
talk
got a talk
show.
show.
You got a talk show? Go ahead
Go
now,
ahead now,
Cece.
Cece. Hi, welcome to the Safe Space Sisi show. I'm Safe Space Sisi, aka Sinclair, the nature loving psychotherapist. Co-hosting with me today is Imani, the marriage and family therapist, and you can find her on Instagram at Therapy with Imani. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So today's life lesson is brought to us by Layered. I actually don't remember where Layered was taken. If I had to guess, I would guess in Grandma's yard because, as you know, that's where the pictures are normally taken. In the picture, you can see that there are different types of clouds. Some are fluffy, some are flat, some are white, some are gray. And so when I was outside viewing these beautiful clouds and I snapped the picture, I was like, hey, this reminds me of all the thoughts scattered around in my mind. And so from this picture, our life lesson is self-healing begins with unpacking our many layers of trauma. So, Imani, what are your thoughts on trauma, recognizing trauma?
Well, I would say when I talk to a lot of my clients, at first I just say define trauma for you. What does that look like for you? When you think of trauma, think of your life, and it doesn't have to fit a specific mold. Because a lot of people hear trauma and they're like, well, I haven't been sexually assaulted or I haven't been physically assaulted, so I wouldn't say I have trauma. But sometimes trauma can come in a lot of different packages, so I say define it for yourself, what it looks like, and go from there. That's usually how we start off.
Yeah, it was very difficult for me to acknowledge that I have emotional trauma because growing up I had everything I asked for except for like the love that I wanted.
Yes.
And it's kind of comical because literally I had and have everything I want, but just not having a hug sometimes can really cause someone to really be sad. So of course my way of working through my emotional trauma is spending time outside in nature and snapping beautiful pictures, but that's not everyone's cup of tea. Everyone doesn't want to go outside and talk to nature and talk to animals like I do. So what are some ways that you yourself or you help clients work through their trauma?
So when I think about anybody in general, you gotta know what you're working with first. So you're not gonna be able to work on trauma if you don't even know how your trauma shows up in your life. So for example, let's just say you have relationship trauma. When you're navigating these relationships, you may not even realize that you're avoiding relationships. You may not even realize that you feel triggered in those moments in relationships because it's showing up in different ways. So first recognize it, and once we recognize it, we can talk about it. And once we've gotten through all of those steps, usually what we do next is figure out what's going to make you happy. Doing things that take your mind away from those triggers, and it just depends on the approach that is taken. A lot of times people use exposure therapy. So if there is trauma around water, exposure therapy could help by just starting off by, let's take a bath, and then let's go to the pool, and then let's go to the beach, and it'll just build and build until that trauma is no longer physically or mentally affecting you on that level anymore. So
yeah, speaking of exposure therapy, I think that's a really cool treatment modality. I'm working with military veterans now, and I have a couple of clients who they don't like big noises, they don't like sounds, and so we talked about they don't like big noises and big sounds, but they want to be out in public spaces and enjoy their time there. So we talked about starting off small, like maybe going to where you know there's going to be fireworks. So when it starts, it's like, okay, I'm preparing myself for this sound, and you're gradually building up to being able to be in public and not react in a very emotionally disturbing way when those events present to themselves.
Absolutely, got to be controlled first, because of course the trauma comes from not having the control over that specific situation. So having that control before you just go out into an environment where there is no control, because we don't want to re-traumatize that person. So trauma is tricky though. Because it shows up in different ways. It can show up emotionally, it can show up physically, it can show up relationally. But in my experience, I think a lot of times it can show up situationally. So specific situations will put me back into just that state that you were in before. And sometimes I have to talk myself down, like, you're no longer in that space. You're no longer associated with those people where the trauma started, so you're okay. So just talking to myself as I would talk to a client or a friend to talk myself down from that trauma.
Speaking of talking ourselves down, so in my blog I mentioned clean mind, clean space. One way that really helped me, in addition to being outside in nature, was writing down everything that was on my mind. You mentioned earlier figuring out what is a trauma, recognizing what is a trauma, recognizing what makes you happy. So I had to write down what was on my mind, because some things there's no like immediate solutions to. There's just ways of figuring out how can I work through this and still do my day-to-day responsibilities.
Absolutely. Journaling, it just depends. Like, what we're saying this, we don't want you to go out and like, okay, I need to journal to get rid of my trauma. If it works for you, there's so many different coping skills. But yeah, journaling is a good one. That is a guaranteed safe space. You're gonna journal. Nobody is there to judge you. You don't get any feedback. You can say the nastiest, meanest. You can say anything that you want when you journal, and you can keep it. And if it's not a safe space for you to keep your journal, say you live with somebody who you can't trust that it's not gonna go through your things, you can rip it up, throw it away, get rid of it. I've ordered a few Destroy Me books on Amazon. Have you heard of those before? Yeah, Destroy Me books on Amazon. Those are great to just a book meant to be destroyed. So
I some clients who are against writing because they fear that people may find it. They like vlogging. Like they either vlog, keep it privately, or they vlog and like they post it on social media as their outlet. And I was like, okay, cool. If that if that works for you, do your thing.
Excuse me. And you can post it on social media. And let's just say you create an account solely for that. You can make it private. Nobody follows you, and you have a whole bunch of things on social media that nobody is ever going to see. You're just talking about your trauma. And maybe one day, if you want people to see it, to see your process, if you've gotten to the point where you feel like you're healed, then at the end of the day, they'll be able to, you can share that experience, but you're in control. So yeah, that's dope.
Yeah, healed. Do you think you're healed from trauma?
Healed. Is anybody ever healed from trauma? I gotta think about that. That's a hard question. I would say I'm healed, but there's still scars there that are not gonna go away, and there's caution around entering into that specific situation or a situation similar to that. So I know it's just gonna take time for me to be fully recovered, but I would say I'm healed. I'm just still scarred.
That definitely makes sense. Another benefit with journaling for me is when I like to, what I call, be in my feelings. When I'm sad about a situation or a trigger from the past, I can open that journal entry and submerge back into that space where I poured it all out, and I can even add to that. Or I can go outside and stare at more clouds, or talk to more animals, or do something to acknowledge my emotions in that moment.
That mindfulness, I hear. That's what you're talking about. And I know again, this whole journey is it's very personal, and there are a lot of people who have similar experiences. So if you are looking for somebody to talk to or share your experience with, I mean, groups are always a great choice, or even online communities are a great choice to go towards as well. But just know, in your trauma, you're not alone. You're not alone. You're not the only person to ever experience this. Yes, it's unique to you, but you're not alone. So yeah, there's a lot of information out there, and there's a lot of good support systems. But also, I think the biggest thing is just remembering that it has to work for you. And just because it worked for 15 people in a similar way doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So it has to be what you need it to be.
Right, absolutely. So saying it has to work for you, right? Just a conversation piece. I communicate all of my needs to my loved ones. They're not hearing me. As a therapist, how do you help clients, or how do you help clients process that?
That's difficult, because if we think about shoulds, family should be there to support you and love you and hear you and respect your boundaries, but we know that doesn't always happen. And so the thing about your own personal journey is sometimes even the people who are closest to you are not going to be there to support you in the way that you want to be supported. And so we just said, just going into that knowing like, okay, everybody may not give me what it is that I need, as long as we are finding what we need somewhere, whether that be within ourselves, whether that be looking at the clouds, whether that be having a close friend or a therapist to talk to and validate and support your feelings. But sometimes it is, all right, well, if you can't give me what I need, I'm going to have to set boundaries with you. If you can't respect my physical space, then we may not be able to have an in-person relationship. We may be able to talk on the phone, but you always want to hug me, and when I tell you I don't want to be hugged, you take it as offense. So maybe we just shouldn't see each other face to face anymore. Things like that is what's going to help you continue to have those relationships with family, but also keep your boundaries so that you stay protected.
Yeah, focusing on what's in our control. Yeah. All right, well, I think that was a great conversation about trauma, unpacking our trauma, ways to work through our trauma. As always, I look forward to what is in store for next week. So join me next time and let's work through our trauma together. And we'll close the show out with Therapy with Imani.
So if you're watching this and you're just trying to find some support or ways to work through your trauma, please know that you're not alone. But the best person or people to go to are always mental health professionals, because that is quite literally their job to help support you, get you the resources that you need, and also know that you're not alone. So thank you, Sinclair, for having me. And yeah, if anybody is interested in therapy and if you're in the RDU area in North Carolina, hit me up, hit Sinclair up. And again, on Instagram, I am Therapy with Imani.
All right, see you next time.
Bye.
The Safe Space CC show. I like that, CC. Let's work through that trauma together. Yeah.